How much does it cost to buy a house? This question has been coming up a lot in the last few weeks, whether that's been from DMs on social media, comments on social media content, text and emails from people just interested in getting in the housing market, through my everyday life with first-time home buyers, or even talking about homeownership with family and friends who are just interested in the real estate market. How much does it cost to buy a house in today's real estate market? Um, so I'm going to break that down today. There's two ways to look at it. There are the broader terms. You could look at the average real estate prices in Halifax. So the average sale price was in the $608,000 range for February 2026. We're going to make that an even 600,000, and you can reverse engineer from there. So you can go $600,000 with a minimum 5% down payment. So the way that down payment works, it's on a rising scale. So essentially, from $0 to $500,000, you are paying 5% down, which is $25,000. From $500,000 to $1,000,000, you're paying 10%. So how does that math work? So if you're buying a $600,000 house, you are paying $25,000 from 0 to 500,000, and then you need 10% of the additional 100,000 to get you up to 600,000. So 500,000 to 1,000. That would then give you 10% of $100,000 is $10,000. So that would give you a down payment of $35,000. Now, closing costs. If you're talking about closing costs, they would include your D transfer tax, which based on the municipality that you're buying in can vary. But if you're buying in Halifax, super simple, it's 1.5% of the purchase price. And then you're going to need your closing costs, which could be your lawyer fees, adjustments could be maybe there is a oil tank on the property, and an adjustment would be that the sellers fill it at closing and you were to pay them back for the full tank of oil that you were taking off their hands. So that would be an adjustment that you can't really qualify for until you're getting into closings. So we always ballpark it at 7% to 7.5% to be safe, just because 5% down plus your 2 to 2.5% to cover your closing costs. So we'll go 2.5% on $600,000 just to be safe. And that would be $15,000. So to buy a $600,000 house, you would need $50,000 saved up in your account. Now, I know that sounds like a lot of money. So this is where we need to get more personal stuff. So if you're talking about home ownership directly for you, I would recommend not going so broad in what you're looking at for numbers. So how do you find out? Well, I would recommend talking to a mortgage broker over a bank. Simply being, mortgage brokers are working for you, not the bank, and they have access to every lender and every type of lending product in the real estate market or in the industry. So they can even talk to you about what you're looking for in a mortgage, whether maybe you want to pay down your debt as quickly as possible. Well, there are different mortgage products that allow you accelerated payments that can allow you to pay off your debt a lot quicker. Maybe you're interested in buying a little crappy house that needs a lot of renovations. Well, Purchase Plus Improvements may be the mortgage for you. And there may be different lenders that help you figure out what best mortgage product best suits what you're looking for to do with your house. So, broker versus bank. The reason why I say broker versus bank, I just list the reasons for the brokers. The other reason would be, if you go to a bank can only sell you their product, whatever they're allowed to do and whatever their thresholds are. For example, we had a buyer a few weeks ago trying to buy a house to do Purchase Plus improvements, and the improvements were pretty substantial. It was about $55,000 worth of work that the client was quoted to finish this house the way they wanted to. We went through a typical A lender at BMO. I believe we were going through refinancing, and BMO has a threshold of only 10% of the purchase price for Purchase Plus improvements. So the purchase price was around $200K. So they were only ever allowed, because of their threshold and their limits, they were only ever allowed to give out $20,000 for Purchase Plus improvements. Obviously, that doesn't cover the whole $55,000 that the client needed and or wanted to renovate their house. So essentially what they did, we just switched the lender. We went to a different lender that allowed them the $55,000 Purchase Plus improvements, and no problem at all. They closed, they got the 55 grand, they're doing the house renovations. C'est la vie. Now, that's broker versus bank. Now, if you are going to a broker for your financing, super simple. What they're going to do is they're going to find out what you can afford from the bank, aka what a bank is going to give you for a loan to purchase a house. Now, there's a few things that come into play here. They're going to ask for your T-Force, your latest pay stub, a letter of employment, and a 90-day history of your bank account. Why? Pay stubs is confirmation of how much money you make. Maybe you get paid biweekly. If you're self-employed, they're going to ask for 2 years of taxes just to confirm how much money you make. From there, they're also going to ask you about your debts. So maybe you make $100,000 a year, but you have a car payment, or maybe you have student loans that you're servicing. Whatever that makes, right? That will come into your debt ratio. Now, banks have GDS, gross debt service ratio, and TDS, total debt service ratio. Essentially speaking, is you can't go over what the thresholds are. I believe TDS is 44% and GDS is 39%. What that essentially means is for every $100 you make, for instance, you can't have 45% over being serviced to debt, because that doesn't leave enough for money for your mortgage, and banks want to make sure that you can afford the payment. So they're going to look at your financing and how much money you make, how much you service to debts, and they're going to try and calculate how much they can give you. The last thing is the 90-day history for your bank account. Is they want to make sure that you have not down payments saved up and your closing costs saved up, or else you can't buy a house, so you can't get a full pre-approval. So they want to know your financing, which is why they're looking at how much you make and how much you pay out in debts, and then they're going to look at whether you can or cannot afford buy a house because you have the down payment saved and you have closing costs saved. If you don't have those things, you can't buy a house. From there, you're going to get your pre-approval number. So maybe the bank says, okay, we're going to give you a loan of $450,000 to buy a house. Fantastic. So now you know the number. Okay, that's amazing. The reason why it's great to know the number is maybe you don't have the down payment, maybe you don't have closing costs, but from there you can at least reverse engineer the number. $450,000 purchase price is a minimum down payment of $22,000. Closing costs of $450,000 is $11,250. So you're going to roughly need about $34,000 to buy your first home. So that gives you the target of what you need to save up. Now, if you don't have a down payment, super simple. There are down payment assistance programs available in the province of Nova Scotia that can help you buy a house. For instance, we love the Nova Scotia Down Payment Assistance Program. It covers your 5% down payment in a 10-year, 0% interest-free loan that you get to decide how you pay back over the 10 years. That's one of the many programs out there. There's also Home Buyers Saving Fund, which goes into your RRSPs and TFSAs. Please talk to your mortgage broker about that. I'm not going to get into that one, but there are options out there for you to use to cover your down payment, which means you only really need to save up your closing costs, which, as we said, is math. $11,250. So that makes it seem a lot more obtainable. Now, once you have your closing costs and your down payment covered, then you can start house hunting. Now, there may be other costs associated with your home purchase. The next cost that comes to mind would be your home inspections. So let's say you're buying in the city or in Halifax proper, and your home is on municipal, city, and water. There are 2 to 3 home inspections available depending on what your risk is. First one is home inspection, of course. That's around $500 plus tax. And then I would always recommend doing a sewer line inspection, just because there's a lot of construction that goes on in this city and you never know if they hit a line or not. So that inspection is around $300 plus tax. So you're almost at $1,000. And if you really want to get savvy into home inspections, you can also do a radon test. I don't recommend them because they take about 3 to 4 months to be an accurate reading. And realistically speaking, based on conditions, you can only do a test for 3 to 5 days. So it's not really an accurate reading. But there is more information available about radon. If you Google Nova Scotia radon map, it'll show you the different maps of Nova Scotia. If you can punch in the address that you're looking at specifically and see what the levels of radon are for that area. Okay, now, if you are buying a home that is more rural on septic and well, there are a lot more inspections we can do. Home inspection, septic inspection, well, water quality inspection, because we want to make sure that the water quality that you're consuming and showering in, you and your family, is safe for consumption. And then you want flow recovery testing, which is essentially, we're going to try and drain this well as quickly as possible to figure out how quickly the water recovers so we can determine whether or not your home will run out of water on a busy day or even during a dry summer. We want to make sure that your well always runs for you to have water in your home. And then you can also do the radon test as well. So those are the 5 inspections you're going to get. Now, Typically, for a home inspection, we're not going to include radon in this. That's a different cost if you want to take on. But standard testing, I've seen standard testing for a home in Minnesota City and Water be around 800 to $1,000 for inspections, and I've seen a home on septic and well be at about uh, $1,500 to $2,000 depending on who you go to in there. So that's your other cost as well. And keep in mind that if your home fails inspections and you cannot come to a reasonable agreement with the seller, then you're gonna have to leave that property and go again on inspection. So that could be a revolving cost if you go through, unfortunately, 2 or 3 homes under contract. You don't usually go through that many. Most I've seen is 2. The worst I've seen is 3. So, it depends on the situation, but that is essentially what the costs are. The final cost would be deposit. So if you are looking for a deposit, it actually comes out of the down payment. So let's say $450,000 house, $20,500 is down payment. Maybe you put up a deposit of $10,000 in your conditions to the sellers that sits in their listing agent's brokerage until closing. Well, come closing day, you're only going to owe $12,500 left for the down payment, which brings you a total of $22,500. So they're the same number. Don't worry about paying it out twice. It's all the same thing. As far as that is all the costs available in homeownership. In the show notes, I'm going to put our contact information for our broker, Andrew Hutchinson and Matt Legato at Indy Mortgage. They can help you with the pre-approval. They can give you a better idea of what you can afford from a bank. Now, few things about this. I do always recommend getting a pre-approval done in case in case you're starting to wonder what you can buy in today's market. It'll just tell you how much you can afford, what a bank's going to give you for a loan, and from there you can reverse engineer how much you need to buy a house. The other thing is that it locks in your interest rate for 120 days. So 4 months. And there's a lot of volatility right now in interest rates just because of what's happening with Trump and Iran and Canada mortgage bonds. Simple enough. That's all the information you need to buy a house. That is all the numbers that are involved with it. And you can use these things over and over to calculate what you need. All right. Any questions about buying a house, leave in the comments and I can help you out. All right. Have a good day. Bye, guys.